What's going on, man? I think we're kind of shifting gears a little bit now from true camp mode into a little bit more of a normal type of a week. Just how's life out in Tallahassee for you guys?
Well, life is really good because we had the day off yesterday, so that was excellent. Got to actually go be like a normal human being for a day, so that was really good. But yeah, we cranked back up today early this morning and getting into somewhat. It's kind of like a hybrid right now, like a
Right.
little bit camp, a little bit LSU, but it's good.
I want to ask you some about just where the team's at and preparing for the season, as well as some of just your college career thus far and your growth the last few years. But when we talked last offseason leading up to this game, you had a level of confidence in your Florida State team that I think from the outside, a lot of people didn't know what to expect. It felt like a really pivotal year and could go either way. What did you see from the team last year that enabled you to feel like it could be that type of a positive step forward of a season? And what are you seeing from this group right now, too, that is now a top 10 ranked team going in?
Right. Coming in last year as an outsider to the program, having had very little experience at Louisville for a year and in at this level, and then a bunch of experience at the high school level. Just at kind of watching the program operate when I first got here, I kept saying to myself, God, like we do everything right. Like there's nothing there's no stone that's unturned. There's no disconnect in the culture where one of the things at Catholic that I always harped on that I think helped us to be so good was that the culture in the math class, the science class, on the football field, all of those cultures were the same culture, and they help to, kids to be successful because they don't particularly do well when they have to act different or be different in different places. And when I came here, I'm like, God, we have that. Like the culture from the top down that Coach Norvell sets, and the expectations of how the guys are and all that. It just seemed to me like, well, I couldn't understand why wouldn't it be successful? Because to me, I'm sitting there looking at it like this is like any other successful program I've ever been around. So I think that was part of it. I think that had a lot to do with it. Was just I felt like we were doing all the right things. We just hadn't received the rewards for them yet.
What's the big step now for y'all from last year to this year where people are, and obviously that's any people are looking at you as all outside stuff, but there's a level of expectation for y'all, I think both internally and externally now. What do you think has fueled into that, and how do you handle some of that?
Yeah, I think Coach Norvell puts it the best is that, nobody's going to have any expectations for us that are any higher than the expectations that we have for ourselves in the building. And he constantly hammers that with the coaches and with the players. And so if that's the case, then whatever the outside expectations are shouldn't really shock us because our expectations are that we're going to go be our best every day, that we're going to be as excellent as we can be. We're going to try to get 1% better each day and then let the results kind of be where they are, because of that. So I think that is really what our what we need to continue to improve on type of thing is just making sure that we meet our own expectations. And if we can do that, then whatever the outside expectations are, will never be higher than that. But I also think you'd be silly to think that the guys and the coaches and everybody don't hear, some of the outside expectations that are out there. So you kind of have to balance those a little bit, and recognize that they are out there. You can't, it's not like we're in a vacuum in here and we can just truly live our lives that way every day in the program. So there's a bit of a balancing act for those two areas of expectation.
As a, I'll say young-ish, I'll give you young-ish coach still. When you look through your track record to this point, you had some college experience before you came back to Catholic, and then your time at Catholic, your time up at Louisville to now a year under your belt in Tallahassee. What have been some of your biggest areas that you feel like of growth or lessons learned along the way that enable you to continue taking steps forward in your career and what you bring to the table?
Well, that's a loaded question, but I always have intuitively known this, but it's somewhat been kind of hard to always put it into practice, and that is, not trying to please everybody, not trying to make sure that every person's public opinion of you is what you would hope for it to be, even though we certainly try to do that. That's certainly one lesson that I continually have to keep learning in that regard. And then, the other part for me is just remembering and reminding myself that my path is my path, and I can't compare, how old, Coach Norvell and I are the same age. And, he's the head football coach at Florida State University, and I'm, just getting started in this kind of college thing. So, continuously reminding myself that, this is what my path is, and my path and my timing of how things are going to play out are not things that you can compare to what other people have done and where they are. And that's certainly another lesson in that. And then once you get to like the real nuts and bolts, obviously recruiting has been something that I've had to learn a little bit on the fly, but I've been lucky to learn that from some really good coaches and really good recruiting departments. So that's certainly a change. But the kids are the kids. I mean, the same problems we have out on the practice field of guys executing and learning the game plan and all that is the same. The ball is the ball for the most part.
How much do relationships with guys like Alex or Yak help when you're making some of those transitions and you're learning on the fly at times? How huge have they been for you?
They've been awesome. I mean, getting to go to work with those two guys, and then just our whole staff here. I say this a lot to some, like I have the unique position where a lot of the people that I work with day to day are a lot younger than me because they're other GAs or analysts that are kind of just getting started. And I remind them quite often, like, guys, not every staff is like this, just the people that we have here. And the thing that is amazing to me is the lack of ego. This business, there's some big egos in this business, especially at this level. And guys like Yak and Alex, they certainly have every reason to have a big ego if they wanted one. And they have just the opposite of that. And they're very humble, and they're very willing to help and encourage, and then give credit, when their position or something happens that happens good for them, they're always quick to give credit to other people, and that also doesn't happen very often in this business. So that's been really good. Obviously Alex and I have been friends for a long time, so that relationship certainly helps. And this is, if you're going to climb the proverbial ladder in the college business, obviously those relationships matter.
Relationships from the roster side of things. You guys have a nice contingent of Louisiana guys that a lot of whom you faced on Friday nights through the years at Catholic. What have you seen from those guys and their connection and what they mean to each other to be a few hours away from home and to have guys like you and Yak, but also each other on that roster that they can kind of lean on and have some familiarity with going back to, in some cases, childhood?
Yeah, it's funny, like some of the people like outside, who aren't from New Orleans, every time something comes up with New Orleans or South Louisiana, like, they just kind of roll their eyes like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, the Louisiana guys, sorry the food's not going to be as good as it was when y'all had it, or one Monday we had red beans and rice. I'm like, hey, it's Monday, red beans and rice. Everybody's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's what you do. You have red beans and rice on Monday. So we all kind of, you got Pat, who's an Edna Carr legend. You got, of course, Yak. Lanier Coleman, who played at Brother Martin, is one of our strength coaches. And then we got a couple of guys from St. Aug, and Bless Harris, who plays offensive line for us, and Byron Turner, and then Jakai and Fat and Greedy, and CJ Campbell, who is from the Southwest Louisiana area. So like there's a really good group of us all together. And then, most of our conversations center around culture when it comes to like food, music. When Mardi Gras came last year, our sports nutrition department did a New Orleans cooking class, and Yak led the cooking class for the team or whatever. So we had all the guys, and we were cooking barbecue shrimp pasta, and they did a big New Orleans theme deal for the class. So it's really been fun. And what's really interesting to me is growing up in New Orleans, if you'd have said Tallahassee, I would have thought that was on the other side of the planet. Like Florida stops for New Orleans people in Destin. Nobody goes any further than Destin when they're in New Orleans. And then when I got here and I realized it was literally 5 hours from, New Orleans to Tallahassee on I-10, I was surprised that it was this close, so it's been good also for our recruiting to be able to just say, hey, you hop on I-10, you drive east, and you get off in Tallahassee 5 hours later, and you're here, so it's been good.
I was gonna say that was a really good sneak in of the recruiting pitch there for the New Orleans kids.
I told you I'm learning
Yeah.
my recruiting thing as we go.
What does opening a season against an LSU mean for y'all? I know it's something you try to kind of keep into a certain perspective, but for all these guys that grew up in a lot of cases watching that team on Saturdays, going to that team's games on Saturdays in high school, what type of a dynamic does that bring to it, and how closely do you try to guard against that becoming too big of a thing?
Sure. Yeah, I remember specifically last year talking to Greedy before the game. Just we really have to try to go. I kind of try to go the other way with it. Like I think when you play that game, there might be a tendency for guys who are from Louisiana to have a chip on their shoulder, I didn't get recruited by LSU, or I didn't, whatever the case may be, and to try to play and perform outside of, what their actual role and capabilities are, so you try to bring them back to square zero of like, this is just another game that we're playing. And, you can't get too emotional about it being, the team you watched growing up and all of that. And then just kind of like with the expectations, like you also have to recognize that that's there. Like that is a thing, that these guys are going to be playing against their teammates from high school. I'll look across the sideline and see guys that I coached, that are in the game, and that's a real thing, and it's there. And so you just try to balance that emotional side of it with the sort of cerebral side of it, which is we're going to play a game. It's a big game, but it's just another football game against a team that happens to be from our home state.
Two truer football questions, I guess. The receiver group that y'all have, there's several or a few Louisiana guys. When you have Ja'Kai back and you bring Keon into the fold, and Fat is now active again, as an offensive coaching staff, what have you seen from those guys? Because all reports that are getting back out here are very strong about what they bring to the table. What stands out about that trio?
That trio of guys, I think if you asked particularly our special teams coaches, they would tell you that like those guys just love playing football. I mean, Ja'Kai is probably on every special teams drill tape cut up that we have. Like, hey, you want to know how to do stack and wrap? Here's Ja'Kai doing stack and wrap, And so I think that's a testament to the coaches that they had in high school, and then to, the culture in Louisiana of football. Typically, if you take those three guys and then you throw Greedy in the mix and all those guys, like they just love ball. They love talking ball. I'll walk past Keon and he'll be talking about how he's going block safeties and blocking and all this. And that's not normally, receivers. Yeah, get me the ball, this route, whatever. And these guys just love ball. And I think I get really proud of that, being a Louisiana guy and a coach from Louisiana, is, seeing guys that we have on the team that just they're good teammates and they just love playing football, whether that's running down and covering a kickoff, blocking at receiver, the things that maybe that you normally wouldn't think they get excited about.
And last year's matchup was a close and at times chaotic back and forth situation. As y'all prepare for this year, suddenly Harold Perkins is a thing on that LSU defense that kind of emerged during the course of last season. Mason Smith is back healthy again after going out early in that game. What sort of challenges do players like that present for y'all as an offense to go into that matchup and know you need to kind of neutralize or contain some of what they add to that equation from what you guys saw a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with a team like LSU on defense is, you go into it and say, well, let's always know where 0 is. Let's always know where 4 is and be able to know where they are. But then, all right, well, 92 can play, like 90 can play, 1 can play. So like the issue is if it was just those 2 guys, you could maybe try to schematically think of ways to try to neutralize them, go a different way, get them off balance and counterattack. But with LSU, as soon as you go away from 1, you're running into another one that's equally as talented and equally as aggressive to the ball and all those things. So that certainly provides a big challenge for us. And then it kind of goes back to what Coach Norvell usually says, which, then you just go back to, okay, it's about us and it's about how we prepare, how we execute, and how we do the things that we've been coached to do. And if you can do those things, then you'll have a shot. If you don't handle that, then you don't have a shot. And if we can handle those things, then you have a chance to be in it in the end.
Anything else you want to share, messages to folks back home, whether that be all those Catholic guys on that LSU roster now, or, high school coaches in the area, whoever may have a chance to watch?
No, the only thing I would say is, there's a lot about Louisiana that makes me proud. Like when I look from afar now and I look back and I watch, high school games when we're recruiting online and, when I talk to coaches or talk to players from Louisiana, like there's so much for us to be proud of when it comes to the product of the character of the kids and the football that they put out. So just keep doing what you're doing because there's a lot of us that are not there that are really proud of what the state's doing in high school football.
Good stuff, man. Appreciate you.
Good to see you.